the night the blizzard came, Clara Hayes was certain nobody would survive the crossing beyond her ranch. Snow slammed against the wooden walls of her isolated Wyoming homestead, the wind screamed through the gaps in the barn, invisibility had fallen to almost nothing. Clara stood on her porch with a lantern in one hand and a coil of rope in the other, preparing to check the horses one final time before locking herself inside for the night. Then she heard it, a horse breathing heavily somewhere beyond the fence. She lifted the lantern higher and saw a dark horse stumbling through the snow with a man collapsed over its back. The rider was barely conscious, his dark coat frozen with ice, one hand hanging uselessly at his side. Clara ran into the storm. "Hey, stay with me," she shouted. The stranger raised his head for a second, looked directly at her and whispered, "Don't let them take the horse." Then he fell forward. Clara grabbed the reins before the animal collapsed, dragged the injured stranger toward the barn, and somehow got both horse and rider under shelter. She had no idea who he was, who had hurt him, or why armed men might be searching for him. She only knew one thing: if she left him outside, he would be dead by morning. Before we go any further, if you love emotional Western stories filled with courage, mystery, action and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to Meaningful Impact 2.1, because this story is only beginning. Clara spent the next several hours fighting the cold as fiercely as she fought the stranger's worsening condition. She cut away the frozen outer layer of his coat, wrapped his injured side, and kept the fire burning until the small ranch house became unbearably warm. The stranger eventually opened his eyes. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair, a short beard, and the exhausted face of a man who had been running for days. "Where am I?" he asked. "Hayes Ranch," Clara replied. "You nearly died outside my barn." He tried to sit up. "My name is Ethan Cole." "Why were you running?" Clara asked. Ethan's eyes moved toward the window. "Because 3 men want me dead." Clara immediately stepped back. "You brought trouble to my ranch." Ethan looked at her with complete honesty. "I didn't mean to, I was trying to get away from it." Before Clara could say anything else, the sound of distant hoofbeats rolled through the storm. Ethan's expression changed. "They're closer than I thought." Clara extinguished the lamp near the window. "How many?" 3, maybe 4. She stared at him. "And what exactly did you do?" Ethan slowly reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded leather packet. He found proof that Victor Blackwood has been forcing small ranchers off their land. He forged claims, bribed officials, and used hired men to threaten anyone who resisted. Clara's jaw tightened. Blackwood's name was familiar. He owned half the cattle in the county and had tried to buy Clara's ranch twice. She had refused both times. Now she understood why Ethan had been hunted. Suddenly, the riders stopped outside. A voice called through the storm, "We're looking for a thief." Clara looked at Ethan. Ethan shook his head. "Don't give me to them." Clara stepped onto the porch with her lantern. "There's nobody here except me and my livestock." One rider laughed. "Then you won't mind if we search the barn?" Clara tightened her grip on the rope. "You step onto my property without permission, and you'll answer for it." The rider moved forward. Ethan watched from the shadows, realizing the woman who had saved him was not frightened nearly as easily as he expected. After several tense seconds, the riders finally turned away. But Clara knew they would return. The next morning, the storm had buried the road, trapping Ethan at the ranch. Over the following weeks, his strength returned. He repaired broken fences, chopped wood, cared for the injured horse, and helped Clara keep the ranch alive. Clara slowly discovered that Ethan wasn't the reckless outlaw the riders had called him. He was quiet, loyal, and surprisingly gentle with animals. One evening, while they stood beside the barn, Ethan admitted that he had once owned a small ranch with his younger brother. Blackwood's men had taken it after his brother refused to sell. Ethan had survived the attack, but had spent years blaming himself. Clara understood that pain. She had lost her parents and nearly lost her ranch. Their friendship became something neither of them named. Then one afternoon, Ethan found fresh tracks in the snow, 4 horses, approaching fast. He walked into the house and placed the leather packet on the table. "Clara, if they come tonight, you take these papers and ride north." She shook her head. "What about you?" Ethan looked toward the window. "I'll make sure they never reach you." Clara stepped closer. "You came here half dead, Ethan. I didn't save you so you could throw your life away." Before he could answer, the barn doors exploded open in the distance. 4 riders entered the property. Ethan grabbed his coat. Clara reached for the rifle mounted above the fireplace. The storm had returned, but this time the danger wasn't hiding in the snow. It was coming straight for their door. Ethan barely had time to reach the barn before the first man charged him. A fight erupted beneath the falling snow, between the stalls and frightened horses. Ethan blocked the attack, stumbled against a post, and fought back with everything his still healing body could give him. Clara stayed near the house, watching for another rider, until one of Blackwood's men tried to circle around the back. She stepped into his path and raised the rifle. "One more step," she warned, "and you'll regret it." The man hesitated. Inside the barn, Ethan disarmed the first attacker and sent him sprawling into the snow. But two more men closed in. Ethan was exhausted, injured and badly outnumbered. Then Clara threw the rope from the porch. It wrapped around one attacker's arm, pulling him off balance long enough for Ethan to strike the man's weapon away. The remaining rider raised his pistol, but before he could fire, Clara's horse kicked the barn gate open, sending it crashing into him. Ethan seized the moment, knocked the weapon aside, and forced the men back. The confrontation was fierce but controlled, ending when the attackers realized they had lost the advantage. They fled into the storm, but Ethan knew they would return with more men. "We have to get the evidence to the marshal," he said. Clara nodded. "Then we ride together." Ethan stared at her. "You could stay here." Clara tightened her coat. "So could you. Neither of us seems very good at doing what we're told." They rode through the storm before sunrise, carrying the documents that could expose Blackwood's entire operation. The journey nearly ended at a frozen crossing when Ethan's horse slipped. But Clara reached him with the rope, and pulled him toward solid ground. By the time they reached town, both were exhausted. The marshal read the documents, compared the signatures, and recognized the names of several ranchers who had disappeared from the area. Within days, Blackwood's scheme began falling apart. Ranchers came forward. Witnesses testified, the forged claims were exposed, the men who had attacked Ethan were arrested, and Victor Blackwood was finally taken into custody. But Ethan had already made a decision. He would not remain in town. He needed to leave for a while to settle his late brother's estate and make peace with the past. Clara tried not to show how much that hurt. "You saved my ranch," she told him. Ethan smiled. "You saved my life first." He mounted his horse and rode away before she could say anything else. Winter slowly disappeared. Snow melted from the fence posts. The creek began running again. Clara returned to the ranch and threw herself into work. She repaired the barn, planted new crops, and rebuilt the damaged fences. But every evening she found herself looking toward the southern trail. Weeks passed, then months. By early spring, Clara had almost convinced herself that Ethan had become another chapter of her past. One warm afternoon, she was standing on the porch with the same lantern she had carried into the blizzard when she heard hoofbeats. She looked toward the ridge. A lone rider appeared against the golden grass. It was Ethan. He wore a clean dark coat. His hair was longer, and the scars of winter were still visible on his face. He stopped at the fence and looked toward Clara. "I told myself I was coming back to repay a debt," he said. Clara walked down the steps, and, Ethan smiled, that wasn't the truth. He dismounted and approached her. "I came back because every road I took after leaving here led me to the same place." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan." He looked toward the ranch. "I found my brother's land, I settled everything. He could have stayed there. I could have started over somewhere else. But I realized something." "What?" she asked. Ethan looked directly at her. "Home wasn't where I came from." He paused. "It was where you opened the door during the worst storm of my life." Clara smiled through tears. "So what are you asking?" Ethan took a slow breath. "Permission to stay." Clara looked at the horse, then at the ranch, then back at him. "You know this place needs a lot of work." Ethan laughed softly. "Good, I came prepared." From that spring onward, they rebuilt the ranch together. Ethan expanded the horse operation, while Clara turned the failing cattle business into something prosperous. They never forgot the night they met, and they never forgot the men who had tried to take everything from them. But the ranch was no longer a lonely place. Years later, whenever the first snow of winter arrived, Clara would light the old lantern and place it beside the window. Ethan would see it from the barn and smile. One evening he joined her on the porch, watching snow settle over the same fence where she had found him. "Do you ever regret opening that door?" he asked. Clara looked at him. "Not for one second." Ethan took her hand. "Neither do I." The blizzard that once brought death to their doorstep had become the beginning of their greatest chapter. Clara had saved an injured stranger, because she could not leave a human being to die in the snow. Ethan had ridden away in spring, because he needed to finish the fight he had started. But he rode back because somewhere between the storm and the sunrise, he had discovered what he had been searching for all his life. Not wealth, not revenge, not another ranch, a home, and this time, he never left. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to Meaningful Impact 2.1 for more powerful Western stories filled with courage, mystery, action, love, and unforgettable second chances. Sometimes the person you save in your darkest moment becomes the person who helps you find your way home.